Hey y'all. I am doing my literary workshop this week on gender studies in Lori Hale Anderson's Speak. I'm thankful that last week Roxanne chose structuralism for her literary workshop because it lends itself to my workshop this week. If you just take a glance at the worksheet and read over it for a moment, it will get you on the right track. With binaries fresh on your minds, it will make it easier for my workshop this week. When I was taking Lit Crit, I struggled to understand how feminism, queer theory, gay and lesbian studies, and gender studies all fit together. I'm hoping that I now have gotten a better grasp, and I hope if this is something that is or was unclear for you during that class, that this presentation will help to make the information clearer while also providing you with different activities to share with students in an attempt to help students understand the world around them and possibly even themselves. One of my sources, 50 Key Concepts in Gender Studies, in the introduction said, that gender studies is an area that has clear applications in the world beyond the academy, and its effects continue to change the way people think about themselves. So, let's get started and explore gender studies in relation to Lori Hale Anderson's Speak. For starters, we are going to look at a few advertisements to determine how they illustrate gender roles, which, keep in mind, reflect our culture and society. And as Pilcher and Wellahan said, they also influence the way that we think about ourselves. I would want to use this activity in the classroom as kind of an icebreaker and to help students understand what exactly I mean when I begin to talk about one's gender being a social construct, which I will get to more in a little bit. I am going to include a link to the lesson plan I based this activity off of in the works cited because it includes an anticipatory set as well as more detailed information if this activity seems like a lesson you want to incorporate into your own classroom. There is a documentary called Killing Us Softly that criticizes the advertising industry by focusing on the different images of women in advertising. In particular on gender stereotypes, the effects of advertising on women's self-image, and the objectification of women's bodies. I'm including a link, as you see here, to the trailer for the most current version of this documentary in case you are interested. It's been updated 4 times. I think that this would be valuable to show in snippets before completing the activity in the classroom. So this activity will address the role media plays in both reflecting and maintaining gender roles. I feel like we are all confident in the definition of culture, but just for clarity and for all of us being on the same page, culture is a social creation, and it teaches us to play roles so we can easily relate to one another. It helps with getting along, and there's a clash of culture, oftentimes there are conflicts. One of these roles is gender roles, and gender roles are something we learn from birth. As we all know, gender roles are different from someone's sex. Our sex is biologically determined and, according to Bressler's text, fixed and stable, whereas gender roles are displayed in commercials and other advertisements. They are socially constructed. I'm going to pull ads from a few different places, but the goal when using this in the classroom is to find something students would normally read. So either asking them to bring in text or going to the library or going out and finding things that you know your students would be interested in. When we look at these ads, I want us to think about whether these texts and images support or counter traditional gender roles. The idea here is to get students talking about the way that the media both constrains and creates social norms. So after each ad, pause to give yourself a chance to jot down your thoughts about each ad. Think specifically about the way the men are portrayed, the way the women are portrayed, and the way that they're portrayed together. So again, just make sure that you pause. You will have to allow the presentation to play to see each one. So, as I instructed you before, I wanted you to make note of characteristics of the ads with the men, the characteristics of the ads with women, and then when men and women are in the ads together, how are they portrayed? Who is in control in the ads? And I did try to choose some of the more controversial ads, especially the Hardee's ones, because I think that that's important. I remember the first time that I saw that ad, just how taken aback I was, but now it just seems totally normal to see that, a couple years later. So, in the classroom, you would have students brainstorm together and then come back as a class to put those ideas together and create a list of generalizations about the roles of women and men as illustrated in different advertisements. So, looking at your answers that you wrote down in your day book, how do the generalizations from the ads compare with your own experiences? Do you think these ads accurately reflect the gender roles in America? And how much do you think the media influences our ideas of what it means to be women? So pause a second to think on that and jot down your thoughts in your day book. Okay, so now that we've explored gender roles in America, let's think about how our novel for the week, Speak, relates to gender studies. Gender studies is a theory that examines the social construction of gender. According to the introduction of 50 key concepts in gender studies is seen by many to further open up the field of women's studies beyond its beginnings in the politics of the women's liberation movement. And I think that was where I really struggled in Lit Crit, is not seeing the difference. But Bressler's text discusses how gender studies extends this conversation to analyze how both men and women are gendered, and how in many cases the two genders work as binary oppositions. We only know one because of what the other is. But with that being socially constructed, that creates kind of an issue. So gender studies works to flip or even erase the male-female binary. It was interesting to me when I went back and looked at Bressler's text to see the same language that we have been encountering in Trite's textbook. The words were power, institutions. Bressler's text used language, whereas Trite's uses discourse and identity. And I found that on page 225 and 226 of Bressler's text, if you want to go back and look. In chapter 12, around those same pages, Bressler discusses Kate Millet's ideas. And her ideas are what I'm really basing this workshop in. Basically, that social institutions and power structures, such as the different ones we have been studying, school, religion, parents, construct gender and what is expected of males and females. So I want to explore the idea of silence and rape culture in the United States in relation to Speak. I think gender studies is the proper literary theory to apply in order to accomplish this, because the novel portrays such an interesting use of a woman's voice and how society suppresses it, even down to Melinda's own family. So just keep in the back of your mind, what is the devastation of not speaking? Not only does Melinda not speak out until the end of the book about her assault, but in general, she just does not speak. So what is the devastation of that? This conflict is easily identifiable as woman versus society, and it is very much a socially constructed conflict. I want our focus from this point on to be on how the genders are represented in this novel. And I want you to think about what those representations suggest about gender and how we as a society perceive them. And we'll return back to that idea at the very end of the workshop. So as I start, or to start this, I would like for you to pause and go back in the novel and find at least 2 examples of when gender roles are defined in very obvious and traditional ways. And to kind of get you on the right track, think back to Melinda's mother, the Marthas, and Heather. Okay, so next, I want you to think about how many different times Melinda comments on her observations regarding gender roles. She is more aware, I think, than most teenagers of gender roles, and This could in part be to the fact that, much like Charlie, she's kind of a wallflower. She doesn't speak. She sits back. She watches. She is very aware and attentive to the gender roles, especially in regards to females as sexual objects. Her sexual abuse, I think, is responsible for this. So let's take a moment to find out what conclusions we have about sexual harassment and abuse and try to dig into the reasoning behind these beliefs. So I want you to go and answer the questions on this questionnaire. I made it on Google Forms, and then I want you to return. But I want you to really think about, okay, why do I think this? Why is this what I believe? So at the end, whenever you were able to see others' responses, were you surprised? If so, why? Did you notice that anyone disagreed with you? And if that did happen, did this make you reconsider your own answers? As a teacher, if you were to use this questionnaire in the classroom, I think that it opens up an opportunity for important discussions to be had. Melinda was a victim of sexual abuse and harassment. As I pointed out earlier, the novel has such a powerful way of presenting Melinda's voice. I would like for you to, once again, pause, go back in the text, and find a good representation of the author's use of voice, one that really stands out to you. Once you have found one, write in your daybook or whatever writing space you use reasons why you chose that section, how the author's use of voice makes the selection meaningful. How do you think the author's use of voice connects to Melinda's sexual abuse? How does the author's use of voice reflect the gender roles Melinda observes? How does the author show the idea that women are viewed as sexual objects by society? Think of all of the different institutions at play in Melinda's story. What do you think would happen if a different tone or voice were used in the selection that you chose? What about in the entire novel? What difference would that make? So pause and really think about these questions. So I have one final activity for you, and I think this one is probably my favorite. Melinda struggled with speaking out about her abuse, which I think is understandable considering how women are received this day and age whenever they step out to speak out about their abuse. And so I would like for you to pause and read the poem Elephant in the Room. And then the next slide has questions. So you may have to flip back and forth between the two slides in the presentation. So I really look forward to seeing what you all think about the elephant in the room and the way that it connects back to speak. In closure, I want us to return back to the focus of how is gender represented in this novel. I hope that the activities really helped you to go back and see that and see the way that the way gender is represented ties back to Melinda's voice and her silence and why she was scared to step out and why she wasn't able to step out and speak out about the rape that she experienced. So I would like for you to go to Padlet. I really liked how that worked in Roxanne's workshop, and so I did use that. It was a great tool. I hope I get to use it in the classroom as well. But I want you to create a new note on there and share with me how you think gender is represented in the novel, and tell me what do these representations suggest about gender and how we as a society perceive them. So thank you so much, and I hope that you are able to get something out of this workshop.